Okay, so today I have three books to talk about. I haven't vlogged for a while. I had a nice week off and enjoyed doing a lot of DIY. And I've had a haircut, so this is a good prompt to revlog while my hair looks good again. And the three books that I've been reading actually go together really well, so I thought it would be a cool vlog to really review the three of them together. So the first book I've read was Burn by Patrick Ness, which just came out a couple of months ago during lockdown, I think. I eagerly downloaded that onto my Kindle and I only just got around to reading it about a week ago. And I also read Wolf by Wolf by Graudin and its sequel Blood for Blood. Now, to put these in context, all three of these books are YA historical fantasy and they are set in an alternative history. They are both set in the 1950s. In the case of Burn, it's a Cold War era, but with dragons. So it's like an alternative world where there happen to be dragons, but all the political things still seem the same as what they would have been in the 1950s. And what Graudin has done in Wolf by Wolf is an alternate history where Hitler has won the war and the war continued into the 1950s. And it is set in 1956, where the protagonist is someone who's escaped a concentration camp. She's Jewish and she is basically on a mission to assassinate Hitler. So you've got a slightly fantastical element in Graudin's book because basically she was subject to some medical experiments in the death camp, and that gave her the ability to skin shift and basically make her face into someone else's. So there's kind of a similarity in these books, and it was funny reading them all back to back because I kind of feel like I've been in the 1950s now for a while, but they were really, really different, and I enjoyed them in different ways, I'd say, as well. So I'm a massive Patrick Ness fan. The Chaos Walking trilogy, I still would hold that up as like one of the best trilogies I've ever read. It is such a unique, creative blend of a new world, of a sort of slight dystopian, alternative future on another planet with fantastical elements. But I feel like Ness just weaves a really complex narrative that every book of the trilogy becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's why one of the reasons I love it so much. So when I saw that he had a new book out with Burn, I thought, well, I've got to get my hands on it. But I have to say, getting into it in part one, found it quite slow. And I kind of felt a little bit like, oh, this is really not what I expected. The book follows a thriller structure, so you've got a girl protagonist, a boy protagonist, and an agent, FBI kind of guy and girl team. And it kind of, to me, in a funny way, reminded me of Artemis Fowl. That kind of, what I think Artemis Fowl does so well is the tongue-in-cheek kind of narrative of agent so-and-so sipped his coffee and looked across the way, and that kind of tongue-in-cheek narrative, and Ness was following this kind of thriller structure, but it wasn't very tongue-in-cheek and there wasn't much humour in it, and the characters kind of all felt really bland to me and I didn't really care about any of them that much. So for me, part one was moving very, very slowly, and it built up to the midpoint of the novel, and the midpoint really for me felt like it was the climax. So I got to the midpoint, which felt like the climax, and felt like, well, if there's another part to this now, if I'm only 50% of the way through, I'm not sure I can deal with this. I'm not sure I can, make it through part two. But Ness did what he does so well, and in part two really turns everything upside down. So I got through part two much faster than part one because I bought into it by that point, and I felt like part two made it worth the ride. But what I would say is I wasn't wholly won over by the book as a whole. I feel like part one could have been a lot better, really, which was disappointing because I had high expectations of it. Now, by comparison, Wolf by Wolf, I have no hesitation in giving that book 5 stars. There's not a word wasted in it. It is pacey, it's got the thriller pace to it, but it hasn't scrimped on character. And I think what Graudin has done so well is that he's got a girl protagonist, Yael, who's obviously been through some horrendous things and has got a real anger and a real sense of she's been through so much, and you really care about her mission and her success. But then what I think Graudin does so well is he brings in other characters through this massive motorcycle race that she's doing from basically Berlin to Tokyo, which is, all these thousands of kilometers, and she's riding on these bikes, and she's posing as a previous winner, Adele Wolf, whose brother Felix is along for the ride too. And so the character of Felix is really interesting. His dynamic with this person who he thinks is his sister, but she isn't. And then one of the other previous victors, Luca Lowe, who evidently had some kind of romantic entanglement with Adele in the previous race. So what you've got is a really compelling triangle of characters. It's not a love triangle, but it's really well developed, and the nuances of Yael's decisions as she has to really pretend to be someone she isn't, but also find who she is along the way. And the book builds, the pace is incredible. You're going through these thousands of kilometers all over the world in this alternate history where obviously half the world is part of the Third Reich, and the other half of the world belongs to Japan. So you've got this incredible imagining of what would our lives be like if that had happened, and the SS are everywhere, and the figures of World War II, Goebbels and Himmler are all still alive. So it creates a very dark picture, but it's just so readable. And if somebody was reading this, it's YA. If someone is reading this who doesn't know a lot about World War II, I think they would still learn a lot from it, and they'd still be able to identify with a lot of the things that are happening in this book. So Wolf by Wolf builds to this thrilling climax where she's got this opportunity where she needs to assassinate Hitler. I'm not going to spoil it, but I had to read the sequel immediately, and I downloaded Blood for Blood. It's basically a 2-part series, so it's not a trilogy, it's just 2 parts. I downloaded Blood for Blood, and I finished that last night. It really combined genres in a really good way. The historical elements, the fantastical elements, which are not so big in the book, the thriller pacing, the sense of purpose, plot-driven narrative, but character arc was completely there the whole way through the 2 books. And it worked so well because things in book 1 that were set up paid off in book 2. So there was that sense of completion, and was just so well paced and so economical as a book as well. I felt so impressed by the writing, and it was one of those things where I thought, gosh, I wish I'd written this, so absolutely stunning pair of books. So I feel like the Patrick Ness one in comparison was more hit or miss. Part 2 was definitely good, but you have to get through part 1 to get there first. But Ryan Graudin, these 2 books are an amazing accomplishment, and I absolutely can't wait to read more of his work. If you love reading YA novels and you want to hear more of my vlog reviews, please hit subscribe and then you won't miss out.